Yeah, no worries. Testing, testing, one, two, three. And am I on video or not on video?
You're not on video. I wasn't gonna put you
Okay,
on video.
that's all right.
Yeah.
Just checking. Got to do a hair check if that's the case.
No, I understand. I mean, I'm on video on my end, obviously, but yeah, it's just voice
hmm
here. How are you? Thanks so much for coming on. I've been trying to get you on here for a while, so I'm glad that we're able to finally have this chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on. Definitely hard to schedule things once you're a mom or a parent.
Oh, I understand. I have two kids of my own, so it can be very, very hectic and hard to do. So I
Oh, how
understand.
old are they?
I have my older daughter Rose, who is over 2, and then my little boy William is about to turn 1 actually on Monday.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah.
Congratulations. Oh my gosh, that would be hectic.
Thank you. You know, it's hectic, but hey, it's twice the fun, right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, wouldn't change it for the world. So,
Yeah. So
um, we're
LGBT
here to talk about,
issues, or
yeah,
specifically trans issues, I believe, right? Is what we kind of wanted to focus on.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't really have much to say on the other stuff. And even on the trans stuff, this may even be more questions than me actually making any sort of definitive statements. But
Well, sure. Yeah,
um,
I'd be happy to try and answer, any questions you have. I think I'm kind of in an interesting place here, just considering the fact that, kind of like what I told you in DMs, I used to be a fan of your content. I used to follow you really closely when I used to be pretty right wing, and I used to believe a lot of the, you know, anti-trans narrative, if you want to call it that, or at least a lot of the anti-trans narrative. Yeah, and I had questions also, but I felt like I kind of have found some of the answers when it comes to this. So yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to answer any questions. I mean, if we want to just start off, if you wouldn't mind, just you want to just explain like your general belief on this issue, maybe?
yeah, sure, happy to.
Okay.
So you probably saw I did a debate with Xander Hall a few
Mm-hmm.
weeks ago, and I think that was when you messaged me right after. Most people agreed I did pretty okay in the debate. I don't know if it was because I did particularly well or because Xander walked himself into the ocean. I couldn't tell you. But on most issues, everyone thought I was at least pretty reasonable, except one, which was transgender issues, which I will admit even though he cited the wrong study at one point, he probably bested me as I'm not the most well versed in that subject. I'm not a doctor, nor am I transgender myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to spend a bit of time before we had this chat looking into the issue. And what I found is that after doing a bit of research, I am even less certain than I was before. And
Really?
there are three things that I know. One is I do not have the answers to how we tackle this issue of gender dysphoria and transgenderism in our society. Two, I don't think most people have the answers, not even the experts. And three, well, I don't really have all the answers and I don't know everything. I feel I have some very genuine concerns
Mm-hmm.
to our approaches with treatment towards youth who believe they may be transgender. So
Sure.
that's where I'm at.
So your main concern with the transgender thing really comes down to children then with gender dysphoria. Like, are you okay with adults, for example, pursuing like gender transition or treatment or whatever they might need? Is your contention
Adults
more
can
with the
do
kids?
whatever they want, but if when it comes to adults too, like for me, they can do what they want with their life, they can do what they want with their body.
Mm-hmm.
But I would certainly, if I had a friend who was going to do this, I would still say, hey, let's look at the research. Let's look at the studies. Let's look at the potential things that could go wrong here. Just
Right.
because someone's an adult doesn't mean I want them to, oh yeah, go and do whatever you want with no caution, right? But
Of
when it
course, of
comes to
course.
my actual, like, okay, this is something we actually need to talk about as a society, definitely more concerns lean around children.
Mm-hmm.
But I did want to ask you something because I found a lot of times when I have these conversations with people that are in the more progressive sphere of things, we tend to talk past each other.
Mm-hmm.
We tend to not really know what each other is saying because we're speaking a different language. We're using different definitions for words. So I was wondering
Right.
if we could actually start with defining some basic words that this conversation will be around, essentially.
Sure. I actually was hoping that we could also kind of talk about, make sure we recognize the distinction between sex and gender too, because I think that that
Yeah.
can be really helpful for the conversation. Was that kind
Yeah,
of what you were
okay. So did
thinking
you want
then?
to Yeah, that's exactly it. Can we start with sex?
Yes.
What you would generally define sex as and if you think it's binary?
Well, I mean, sex is generally speaking bimodal, which means that there's some like gray area and some nuance there. But generally speaking, yeah, there are two main sexes for the most part. That sex refers to like biological characteristics, so like genitals, hormones, that kind of thing. Gender, when I talk about gender here, and you know, that way that I guess the academic definition would be a set of social roles and behaviors that we apply to people or prescribe to people that have a certain biology. Now, some of these, just to be very clear, are correlated with biology, but they're not necessarily connected to biology. So, for example, I would say it is a prescriptive gendered role or gendered trait or gendered behavior, however you want to call it, that men are stronger than women. Now, men, generally speaking, are stronger than women. So that's where this sort of gendered prescription comes from. However, if a man is not strong, he's still a man, right? So that's kind of what I want to get at there with, yeah, gender is the social prescriptions, and then sex refers to the biological characteristics. Did that answer the question?
Sure. I just want to clarify what you mean by there's gray area with sex.
Well, sex being bimodal, that just means that it's on kind of a spectrum. So like some people might have female genitalia, but like a mismatch of chromosomes, right? That's a good example of how sometimes sex, there are gray areas there. But generally speaking,
so that's where I disagree with you. I think sex is binary, not bimodal, since sex is based on gametes.
but that's not the only thing sex is based on. I mean,
Well,
I wanted
it's
to have
the
a conversation with
primary
you
thing.
about
There's
transgender
secondary.
people, not necessarily
Right,
sex.
but I want to make sure. But these things are important. I want to make sure that we have
I
at
mean, if
least
you
an
want to, for the
understanding
sake of
or an
the,
understanding that we disagree.
sure, okay. I mean, yeah, we can.
Because I think it's important because when we talk about being transgender, in some cases people will bring up, oh, okay, well, there's mixed match biology, so then there's an in between sex. I don't believe that that sex is bimodal. I think that there is
Why do
one
you
or
not
the other
believe that?
sex. I don't because sex is based on gametes. That's why it's called sex. It's based on whether your body is built to produce egg or sperm, what your reproductive roles are. That's what all anisogamy mammals base their sex on,
I mean,
those
I'm not really.
reproductive roles.
I really want to make sure that we focus this debate on the issue of transgender people. I'm not really here to debate you on the intricacies and like of sex. I don't want to like just make an appeal to authority necessarily, but I'd be happy to send you an article that explains how sex is bimodal. I mean, this is kind of the accepted scientific consensus on this issue at least. But you know, even for the sake of argument,
I disagree with that.
but but I mean, even for the sake of argument, then we could just go ahead and say, okay, fine, there are only two sexes. That doesn't change anything for the
Okay.
discussion when it comes to trans people.
Well, no, it really does when people are trying to base someone's biological sex and say that actually biological sex has a gray area based on secondary sex characteristics. It really, in fact,
But that's what
gender and
bimodal
sex
means.
are the two biggest questions in considering the topic of transgenderism. No, because so you look at even people that are intersex, and
Hmm.
in 99% of cases with people who are intersex, they are obviously one sex or the other.
But that's because we don't.
You
That's
can
not
check
the.
if they have a
That's
S
not
or
the
a Y,
only
if
way
they
that
have
we
a Y
determine.
chromosome in there.
That's not
No,
the
it
only
is.
way
It
that.
is. It
No,
is the
that's not the only
primary
way that we
way.
determine sex. But I don't really want to get hung up on this.
You're
I want to talk about
confusing
the
sex and
broader.
sexual expression.
No, I'm talking
Sexual
about how
expression
they
is
measure,
the
how scientists
outside
measure sex.
aspects.
No, how scientists measure sex within the. Let me go ahead and, if you want, I can send you an article on this. Um, but I
I mean,
don't
yeah,
even know if that's.
we can
But
go,
I
we
don't
can
even know if
skip
that's
this, but
necessary. I
yeah,
think.
we disagree here.
Okay,
I can send you an article on this as well.
Okay, fine. Let's just agree to disagree on this then, because that doesn't really
Okay.
change anything when it comes to the transgender conversation and my general belief that trans people are valid and that the treatment for trans people seems to be obviously the best move for trans people, right? To help them get better from gender dysphoria.
Okay, so quickly, since we're just going to agree to disagree on sex, can we just confirm gender at least?
Yeah, so
I think I generally agree with your description of gender, which
okay,
is
cool.
the sociological roles that society defines.
Right.
one specific sex of having, but that definition does vary depending on which dictionary you look at, right?
The definition can vary, and it also can vary with when colloquially versus the way it's used in like a technical academic sense. But obviously, since we're having a kind of technical conversation, it sounds good that we agree on the difference between sex and gender for the most part. But yeah, when we're talking about transgender individuals, we're talking about people suffering from gender dysphoria, which is when their identity is a mismatch from their biology. And it seems pretty clear that the best way to help trans people get better is to obviously treat the gender dysphoria, right?
I mean, yeah, okay, you say it's very clear, but not even all transgender activists agree that transitioning is the cure for all transgender people.
Well, it's because it's not
I
the cure.
did.
That's not the cure all for transgender people. There are multiple steps to be taken, but transition is obviously one of the larger steps we can take. Sorry to cut you off. Go ahead, please.
Okay, that's all right. That's all right. We can get into why or why not after, but can we look at the before we kind of get down to the nitty gritty, the studies where we're absolutely not going to agree on things potentially, or have some, it's going to get down to a numbers game. Can we talk a little bit more about the philosophy of this all? Because I did want to get through a bit of that first before we get right down to numbers.
Sure. I mean, yeah. Like, what do you mean the philosophy, like the social construct and what that looks like?
So like there was, so the idea of gender, would you agree, was kind of defined in the 40s by Simone de Beauvoir and other feminist activists who wanted to separate the idea of sex and gender because they didn't want one's sex to determine what their role in society was.
I'm not really sure exactly where the term gender originated from. I'm more interested in how it's applied today, though. And so I'm not
Okay,
sure,
well, okay,
if
so that I think this is interesting because that was the initial conception of why we had gender. We wanted to say, you know what? Sex is purely your biology. There's male and female, and before it was kind of like, okay, and based on your sex, you have a gender role in society and you cannot escape that. So
Mhm.
feminists looked at that and they said, actually, your expression of your sexuality and how you interact with the rest of society should not be based on simply your biology. So if we
Mhm.
separate sex and gender and we make gender into the social roles that people have in society and make that something that people can vary in, there are very feminine men and very feminine women, then we have created liberation for women because you can have a person who is biologically female that can play a male role in society if they would like, or a
Mhm.
female role in society, or in between. Um,
So
so,
what does that have to do with anything? I mean, yeah, of course, gender is like gender
well, it
being
seems
a
like we're
social
going
construct.
to a reverse of sex and gender, where we are saying again, actually, when a girl plays with trains, she's now a boy.
No, no,
And
no. Hold on. Whoa, whoa, whoa. We're going a little bit off there. Let's try to stay on the philosophical element of gender. So, gender being a social construct exists as a result of human interaction, and whether we want to call it gender or not, gender has always existed among humans. And gender has always had no
mhm.
bearing on biology and has also changed over time. So, like, for example, at one point, it would have been a gendered behavior for men to wear high heels because it was masculine to be taller. That was gender, and even though they didn't call it, it's great. All right, well, let me just put the stream on pause here, Lauren. I'm so sorry.
No worries. That's all right.
All right, guys, try to refresh your stream. People are still saying it's just too low of a bit rate.
Mm.
Well, people are saying it's back, so let's just go
Okay.
ahead and continue with
Are
the
we back?
yeah, people are saying it's back. We'll go ahead and continue with the conversation. It'll be posted up when it's done though. So
Okay.
so if sorry, I kind of go ahead if you want to repeat that. To where were we again?
Honestly,
Shit, I probably should.
can't even remember.
I know, right? I think
Gone.
we were talking about the philosophical makeup of that's right. We were talking
Yeah,
about
we can
gender
move
and
on from that if you want.
yeah, we were talking
Yeah,
about gender
I
and
don't mind
sex.
moving on from it.
Okay, cool. So we kind of agree then that sex and gender are different for the most part for the sake of this discussion too. So it sounds like we're making
Mhm.
some decent ground here. So like when trans people, right, are and trans youth also, when they have gender dysphoria, when they have that gender incongruence and that depression and that anxiety and that discomfort in their own body, it's been medically proven repeatedly that the best way to help trans people and help them get better is by putting them through treatment, right? Doesn't that just kind of follow?
Okay, so this is an interesting question. Have there actually been well done studies showing that is the best line of action?
Yes, there has been, but also I'd want to know what specifically, like, has what, like puberty blockers? Because I'd be happy to, if you want to focus on puberty
Yeah,
blockers specifically.
actually I was gonna say it depends on what you mean by treatment because there are so many approaches, aren't there?
Well, usually
Um,
what happens is that, generally, if a child is showing signs of gender dysphoria, according to the American Psychological Association, you have to be showing gender dysphoria for a minimum of 6 months consistently. So when trans people are suffering from gender dysphoria, they meet with a therapist, they meet with a doctor, they meet with psychologists. It's a long process. And keep in mind that at least in the US, there's only like 50 gender clinics in the entire country. So it's not like it's this really easy thing to get a hold of. And then after a lot of consultation and talking to the child, sometimes they are put on puberty blockers, which, yes, like all medicine, has potential side effects or potential risks, but generally
mhm.
speaking, they seem to be relatively safe and the benefits greatly outweigh the risks.
Okay, so I would reckon that there's probably more research around adults since bringing hormone blockers and certainly sex reassignment surgery to kids would be fairly new and
Sex reassignment,
controversial and not even
just
allowed.
sorry to cut you off again. I do want to, make sure I
Yeah,
let you make a point. But just to clarify, sex reassignment surgery, that's not really happening to children. I think it's the Endocrine Society actually recommends
well,
that.
that's yeah,
That doesn't
that's
even.
what I was saying.
Yeah, that's
So
okay, sure. So
what I'm
let's just
saying is,
focus
can
on.
we? Yeah, can we quickly just like, are there any studies in adults? Because I reckon adults would have the best research around them since you can do more with
Sure,
adults than
there's
with kids. Do you
yeah.
have any studies that show that trans putting people on hormones, giving people sex reassignment surgery, that has positive outcomes and improves their quality of life?
Yeah, do you want me to send you like a specific study? I have a meta-analysis here from
Yeah,
Cornell with 55 different studies. They're all peer-reviewed, and I can just read you this quick little summary if you want. It says this search
yep.
found a robust international consensus in the peer-reviewed literature that gender transition, including medical treatments such as hormone therapy and surgeries, improves the overall well-being of transgender individuals. The literature also indicates that greater availability of medical and social support for gender transition contributes to better quality of life for those who identify as trans. Now, I can send you this if you want. This
Okay,
is
so yeah, no, I've just opened it. This isn't a meta-analysis.
what is it?
It's a systemic review.
Okay, so it's a systemic review of 55
Systematic
different
review.
studies that are all peer-reviewed, and it
Okay,
found that
do you know the difference between a meta-analysis and a
I do
systematic
know the
review?
difference, yeah, but if you don't like this one, I actually do have a meta-analysis here
Well, no,
also.
let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at this because I have seen a bit of the Cornell
Okay.
systematic review, and I just want the audience to understand the difference between a meta-analysis and a systematic review because it does matter. A meta-analysis is when you use statistical techniques to try to find out to try to combine these studies and find a result and find how good they are. But you use statistical techniques. A systematic review does not use any techniques. It literally just compiles studies. You could go into Google Scholar and create your own systematic review
All right,
by
well, I
just
can send
clicking
you
and
if
combining a bunch of studies.
if
But
you're not too happy with that
um,
one, I can send you a different one, which is a systematic review and meta-analysis of
well, no.
quality of
I
life.
want to talk about this. I want to
Okay.
talk about this study because it's important and because a lot of people tend to name the Cornell meta-analysis as an absolute, uh, you know, this is what proves that gender affirming surgery works. Most of the studies in the systematic review have a sample size of under 100, with some of them
That
in
doesn't
here
no,
having under 20.
that's
That
trying
is
to
not
invalidate
representative of the general population.
that's
One study was added twice by mistake, and the largest studies in here actually have the most severe problems.
there are always going to be issues when it comes to compiling data like this. A systematic review, though, it's supposed to look over all of the different peer-reviewed literature and come to a general conclusion. If you're not happy with this, I think that going through individual and trying to pick off like sample sizes, do you have counter data to prove your position,
I,
or
I do, and I'm happy to talk about it, but I think it's a big problem when a lot of people, certainly I know you're not in the bread tube community in
I'm
particular,
not,
but a
no.
lot of people in the bread tube community, a lot of people in progressive circles, they tend to, in debates, just throw studies at people and say, I'm correct because study, because study, because study. And then they haven't read the studies. They don't know how the study was done. I mean, in this Cornell systematic review, there are things in here that aren't even studies. They're just cost benefit analysis of transitioning
Do
that
you have
doesn't
any
answer
counter
any
data?
questions, that are no
There's
original
still
research.
there are still 55
Padula,
different studies
Haru, and
here.
Campbell, 2015 in there.
There's still
Then
different there's
Bailey,
still
Ellis, and McNeil, which had one of the highest sample sizes in there. It was a narrative analysis that utilized an online survey, which was promoted by LGBT groups and support
there are
organizations.
going to
Do
be
you think
there's
that that is a
Lauren,
non-biased sample size
there's going to be room for error,
or
of course.
sample?
If you don't like the Cornell study, I'm happy to send you multiple other studies. But by going through the methodology and trying to like cast doubt on the study, that's not really a good argument. I'm curious if
No,
you have
Hunter, studies are only as good as their
I'm
methodology.
curious if you have alternative data that proves that it's not good for trans
I'm
people.
not the one trying to put children through hormone therapy. I'm the one saying we need to be patient and we need to
Well, hold
get
on.
better
This
data.
was an overall systematic review, I believe, of adults, and that's what you asked for. You asked for stuff with adults. I can send you a different study. It's not a meta-analysis, but it's still a study on the benefits of puberty blockers for children.
Would you at least agree that methodology matters?
Of course, methodology matters, but I also think that it's kind of dishonest to try and poke holes in the methodology when you're not willing to provide data, like alternative
Hunter, I
data.
don't need to counter studies when your own studies are of poor quality.
Well, do you want me to
Like
send
it's
you a
not,
different meta-analysis? This is a systematic review and
yeah, I'm happy
meta-analysis of
for you
quality of
to.
life and psychosocial outcomes from the Wiley Online Library.
Okay, let's see this.
That's another meta-analysis. And then, but again, like we're kind of getting down in the weeds here. You asked me for studies about adults. Do you want to go back and talk about puberty blockers and the way that that helps children? Here's
Okay,
a
no, no, no.
study.
Let's look at this study for because I don't want you can't just throw studies one after another at me. We have to actually look at the studies, go through them a bit, and then we can move on to the next one. Just throwing
And this
studies at
is
someone is
lower
not a
quality evidence.
conversation.
I'm admitting right now that this is a little bit lower quality evidence, but when it comes to social sciences, it's extremely. I was actually just having a conversation yesterday with someone who is minoring in statistics. How when it comes to social sciences, it's really hard to control for all of these variables. We have to work with what we have, with the limitations that comes with social sciences, and what we have right now. These are the meta-analyses that suggest that sex reassignment tends to better the transgender individual.
Okay, and I'm assuming on this Wiley study, Murad, that you read the summary of it at least,
I'm already
correct?
acknowledging that it's lower quality evidence, but that's because of
No,
social.
Hunter, there's low quality evidence and there's very low quality. And they've the people who wrote this study say it is very low quality. This is 7 of the studies in here were only questionnaires. Only 3 had control groups, and the control groups didn't even match the criteria.
Do you have
None of the
data that
studies were
counter?
randomized,
Do you
so
have data
none of
that?
them were representative of the average
Hold on. I
population.
just tried to explain that when it comes to social sciences like this, it's really hard to control for all of those different variables. Secondly, anybody can look at studies and say this is poor quality. That's not really an
Oh
argument.
wait, can you link me? I think I'm looking at the wrong Wiley Online study. Can you link me the one you're using?
Is it the hormonal therapy and sex reassignment, a systematic review from 2010?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
looking at the right one.
Okay.
So that's not really, I don't think that's a
Yeah.
very solid argument. And if you want, we can go ahead and look at what you asked me originally, which was pubertal suppression for transgender youth. And of this one, the conclusion is this is the first study in which associations between access to pubertal suppression and suicidality are examined. There is a significant inverse association between treatment with pubertal suppression during adolescence and lifetime suicidal ideation among transgender adults who ever wanted this treatment. Now, I've heard you talk before. I listened to some of your discussion with Xander Hall. I think it was a pretty interesting discussion. And you made it really clear that, you care about transgender people. You recognize that
Of course.
they're struggling, of course. And I think that that's true, but I just don't understand how you can say you care about transgender people, but then be against what seems to be the treatment as of right now.
Hunter, because I care about people that are struggling with gender dysphoria And because I absolutely care about children, I want to ensure that people are getting the proper treatment and not just jump into something that seems like a popular social fad with a lot of really poorly done research. And if you have
So
the
what's your
data that
solution?
shows, if you have the data that shows that this is actually helping and this is actually improving lives, like I'm not a psychopath. If if I were given an option, tell you this,
Hmm.
if I were given an option between a child who is going to commit suicide, and we know this 100%, or we can use an experimental treatment on them, I'm
Hmm.
going to pick the experimental treatment every single
So
time.
this
I'm
is
not a
another issue, though.
psychopath.
This is the kind of straw man, though, is this isn't an experimental treatment. The FDA has already approved puberty blockers for children who aren't even transgender if they go through what's called precocious puberty, where you enter puberty too early. That like there's not there these aren't
Yes,
experiments
and
being
there have
done.
been studies done on that show it lowers the IQ of girls who have been on it by 7 points.
I mean, I
Like
would
it's
be very
not.
curious to see those studies. Like, listen, when it comes to medication, there's always going to be a risk. Every time,
Yes.
anytime we take a medication in general, right? We are recognizing subconsciously that hey, there are risks and there are benefits. Do the benefits outweigh the
Right.
risks, or vice
Correct.
versa? When it comes to like, if I told you right now, how would you feel about giving your kid a medication that has potential side effects of turning their eyes yellow, making them vomit, diarrhea, a fever, possible like intestine infections? You would probably be like, hold up, that doesn't sound too safe. But that's amoxicillin, the most common cold/flu medication we give to children. Like ADHD medication has been linked to long-term, like infertility, long-term use in mammals.
I
We
know.
give that
I have ADHD.
we give that medication to children. Like this is how medicine works. There are risks and there are benefits. And when you look at this puberty blockers thing, you can either look at it from there's a negligible chance of a slightly lower decrease of bones, which by the way would improve once they get older and go on HRT. And then maybe like a very slim chance of like infertility occurring. Maybe these are slim, very unlikely things to happen versus for what? To live a generally better life, a better quality of life, and not fucking hang yourself when you're an adult. I think that that's generally a good thing.
Yeah, for sure. I just wanted to quickly point out one thing. I find, because I watched a few of your other debates before coming on here, and I find you do an appeal to authority thing a lot. Like, this is FDA approved, therefore it's good, it's perfect.
No,
The
that's not
FDA
what I
and some of
said.
these organizations.
That's
Like,
not
do
what
you
I
agree
said.
that the FDA have made mistakes before in approving medicines?
Yes, but do you also agree that by taking that approach, you're basically making it so that your argument can't be argued against? I'm not making an appeal to authority.
No, no. We
I'm
can,
not making an
I'd love
appeal
to
to
talk
authority.
about the
If
actual,
I could just
we
finish
can
really
talk about the
quickly,
science.
I'm
Yeah,
not
okay.
making an appeal to authority. An appeal to authority would be if I was appealing to someone who's an authority figure in a different area. Like if I were like, well, Brad Pitt says this is good, that would be an appeal to authority. The FDA is an authority when it comes to approving medication, and they've already approved the puberty blockers. They've been used since the 80s on cis kids. This idea that this is like some experimental drug or whatever is just, it's not true. What's happening here is just kids suffer from gender dysphoria. It's been happening forever and it's going to continue to happen. And this is what's been shown to better their mental health. That's what I want to do. I don't want trans people to suffer, and I want to make society better.
Okay, so let's talk about whether this actually helps people or not. First, just so the audience are aware, the FDA have approved drugs that have killed tens of thousands of people and then retracted them and tried to cover up their release, like Vioxx.
You
I
keep
suggest
trying to
people
poke
look into
holes in
that.
what I've
So,
said without
yeah, no, no,
providing
I'm
counter
telling,
arguments.
I'm telling the
Okay,
audience,
okay.
just so you know, the FDA have made mistakes before, and you can look into it. Vioxx. You wanted some counter evidence. The studies for oh, I can't even pronounce it. He's got a Polish last name. Wojniak 2016 was a study of young girls who were treated with triptorelin, which is one of the GnRHs, which is generally used to block puberty. And it showed that with a control group, their substantial amount of IQ points went down by 7 points
Did they attribute that
after
specifically
2 years
to the
of
puberty
treatment.
blockers?
Uh, Compared to a control group, this is what their conclusion was in the study, that
What was
their
what was the medication
children
called?
took the IQ tests, triptorelin, which is one of the Lupron and triptorelin are the two main in the GnRHs
Right,
that are
right,
used
okay,
to
yeah, yeah. I
block
just want to make
puberty
sure.
in
Okay.
kids. And I mean, Lupron, there's a ton of studies on the negative effect it's had on adults, particularly grown men who have prostate cancer and have had to take it. They get loss of sexual function. Obviously, testosterone produces red blood cells, so they get anemia, they get reduced hemoglobin, loss of muscle tissue, fatigue,
I
mood
think that
changes,
I think that you're kind of getting off.
metabolic syndrome, bloating, cognitive issues.
Lauren, no one's
You're
disputing
saying I'm getting off topic, but
No,
I'm
because
saying
no one's
these are some of the.
I know, but no one's disputing that medication has risks. We already acknowledge that. Like I already said, I mean, every time you take a Tylenol, like too much of that shit can kill you with fatal liver problems. Like all medication has potential risks. The IQ thing, like IQ can change, especially when people are younger. I would have to see that study and know if it was actually directly like correlated to puberty blockers at all. When it comes to the other claims, though, about like I said, lower bone density and whatnot, these are negligible.
An 8 IQ deficit is extreme. That's extreme.
I would have to take a look at that study at some time. I'd be happy to look at it sometime to see the IQ thing. But you know what? Again, we need to talk about whether or not the benefits outweigh the negatives. And I think let's go ahead and say, let's go ahead and even say, okay, fine, it lowers your IQ, whatever. What's better, to have a little bit of a lower IQ and not fucking kill yourself, not have depression, live a better quality of life versus what? I want to know what your solution is to this, because you're kind of against what is sort of accepted as the treatment right now. So what is your solution?
What is my solution? Well, okay, let me ask you, what do you think is the better outcome for a child? To have gender dysphoria and to struggle with this issue that we both know causes mass amounts of psychological, mental, sociological crises in people. It's tragic. It is not a fun thing. And
it's tragic.
When I've spoken to transgender people, I know, it's a hard thing for them. And I will admit, I think this is something that conservatives don't acknowledge enough, that this is a genuine struggle. People don't choose this. It's not something, they didn't choose to not want to be in the right body, right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, if they're dealing with gender dysphoria, then yeah, in this context for sure.
Not great. So I think the best solution, first of all, is that people not have gender dysphoria in the first place. Can we agree there?
I mean, yeah, but how would you go about doing that?
Okay, well, there is an 88% desistance rate in gender dysphoric boys. And that means they think that they have gender dysphoria, and then they decide later on that they don't actually have it. They desist. And that is an amazing result. Usually they go on to become gay men. That's usually what they go on to be. Oh, I actually was just gay. I wasn't a woman. And the problem here with puberty blockers is the main deciding point for children when they desist, that has been studied, is puberty. So you are reducing the chance of someone not having to struggle with gender dysphoria for the rest of their life by not allowing them to go through puberty and have this 88% chance of desistance, which is from the, I can send you the study on this.
Yeah.
I can send you the studies
Please
that
do.
show. Okay. So here's the 88% desistant rate in young boys, and then here's the Sage. This is from Sage Journal. This shows adolescents with persisting gender dysphoria, persisters, and those in whom gender dysphoria remitted, desisters, indicated that they considered the period between 10 and 13 years of age to be crucial.
Okay, can I cut in here really quickly?
They became increasingly aware of the persistence or desistance of their childhood gender dysphoria.
I already know what the issue is with this right here, and this is a problem with a lot of this.
Yeah.
It's actually kind of interesting because you just started talking about the methodology. Studies like this follow the referral rate. So of course you're going to see a larger decrease of people who are referred, because that's the point of going to a clinic, right? You're referred there to go, hey, let's get checked out and see if this is anything to worry about or not. So of course you're going to see a larger decrease if you just look at who's referred to clinics. It says right at the beginning, this study reports follow-up data on the largest sample of boys clinic referred. So if you actually look at once people are, now this is clinic referred for gender dysphoria. So again, that could mean that, they thought they might have gender dysphoria, so they were referred to the clinic. When you actually look at it in a way that when you control for kids who actually are confirmed gender dysphoria, the regret or the detransition rate is only around like 13%. And out of that, the vast reason for that is because external factors like pressure from the family, school environments, vulnerability to violence and whatnot, which again plays into the fact that this is a social issue, that we need to be more accepting of trans people if we want to actually help them. Lastly, you talk about kids you talk about kids like growing out of stuff, right? Well, that supports.
Okay,
Wait, hold on. I just really quickly want to say this, and then I'll let you respond. When you talk about kids growing out of stuff, that supports my point. Puberty blockers, this is why they're relatively safe and reversible for the most part, right? It's so that you can put kids on puberty blockers to make sure that they can decide, am I trans? Am I not? Do I want to pursue treatment as I get older, or do I not? Because the risk of going through the wrong puberty greatly raises their chance of killing themselves later on down the line.
Okay.
So if you're worried about them detransitioning or changing their mind, that would support puberty blockers, right? Because they're reversible.
Okay, if you are claiming that this study is flawed because it uses referrals, that's almost every single study regarding transgenderism.
I can send you a study that didn't. That actually
uses.
I can literally send you a study that
uses
didn't.
referrals. And detransitioning is not desistance. They're different things. Almost every single study, the best evidence that's out there, and you can look into this, people watching this can look into this, shows a desistance rate of at least above 50%, which means by continuing kids and by not letting them go through natural puberty, there's at least tons of kids that did not have to go through drugs for the rest of their life, that did not
what do
have
you mean
to
drugs
deal
for the
with
rest of your life?
gender dysphoria. Well,
what do you mean? Kids can go on puberty blockers, give themselves a second to figure it out. If they decide, hey, I don't think I'm actually trans, I'm okay, they go off the puberty blockers and continue their puberty.
When the point of desistance, when the point of deciding that you are transgender or not is generally when you go through puberty and you stop that, and instead you put a kid on drugs that prevents them from getting to that point where people generally decide, does that not?
That's not true. It's not.
Because you're either going in one direction or the other. You're either leaning your kid towards desistance or you're leaning them towards a full-on transition. And
what would be better?
To put someone on drugs
what
is
would be better?
Leaning them towards a full-on transition.
If your child is exhibiting
signs,
signs,
someone not struggle with gender dysphoria in the first place.
Well, then your position is completely unattainable and unrealistic. I don't this is like if I came up to you and said, hey, I really support people with OCD, anxiety, and depression. OCD is something I actually struggled with growing up. That's really tough, man. It sucks. But I don't really support giving people, antidepressants or any of the medication that helps. Now, the ideal situation would be just don't have anxiety. This is unrealistic. Come on, this isn't how we solve problems.
Well, I'm sorry, Hunter, but there are not people I have ADHD. I was born with it. My dad had it. I am medicated for it. I personally waited until I was out of high school. It takes at least a 6-month process to get the drugs for it because they are serious and have impact.
Literally, the APA handbook for trans people is a minimum of 6 months of consistent gender dysphoria, right?
Hunter, if I had an option to desist, or if it was a possibility that I could desist from having ADHD, holy shit, that would be amazing. But that's not.
But we're not talking about that. Again, when we look at
comparing apples and oranges.
No, I'm not. When we look at the studies,
ADHD.
When we look at the studies of people who have gender dysphoria, when we know that they're confirmed gender dysphoric, the majority of them go on to transition. I can send you other studies too of different.
No, the majority of kids go on to desist.
No, this is based on referral rates again, which is completely flawed.
We have mass amounts of people desisting.
That's not what that could mean that they were struggling with gender dysphoria and chose not to. Some of the regret rate or desistance rate or whatever is also because of social stigma. So this doesn't make any sense. What you're saying right now is that it'd be better not to be gender dysphoric. So let's say, your kid is showing some strong signs of gender incongruence.
I'm saying that
what would you really just look them in the eye and be like, yeah, you should not have gender dysphoria? I mean, this is a ridiculous argument.
No, that's not what I'm saying. If someone continues on and they get past this point and they don't desist after puberty, which is very likely that they will, then we have to talk about other potential approaches. And I don't actually think, based on the very poor research that I've looked into, I don't think that transitioning medically actually helps in the way that you're suggesting it does.
Really? Is it purely
Yes.
because you were not satisfied with some of the sample sizes of the studies?
Well, no. Well, first of all, yes, there are some low sample size studies that show there is a minor correlation with positive life outcome, which
There's not even any studies that show a negative one, though.
Yeah.
There's not even any
No, the best studies we have show no cause at all. So why would we put children on drugs with very poor research when the best studies show us it has absolutely no
Where
impact at all.
you're correlating things that aren't correlate. You're equivocating things here. First of all, you're talking about a poor methodology of a study on general treatment like surgery and hormone therapy for adults, and you're comparing that to puberty blockers. Puberty blockers have been researched and studied. Like I said, they're confirmed by the FDA. They've been used for cis kids for decades. These are two different things
Yes,
that you're talking about
with
right now.
extreme risks.
No,
Okay,
not with
let's see.
extreme
Okay.
risks. Negligible risks that always are outweighed by the benefits. To have a better quality of life is a much better benefit to trade for a potential risk of like slightly
Okay, so
lower
let's
bone
okay,
density.
let's talk about whether there is a benefit to life then. Would you agree that when there are bad studies around whether medical transition works and good studies around whether medical transition works, we should look at the good studies?
Sure.
Have you heard of Brandstrom and Pachenkas?
I've not. Is this the Swedish one?
It is a Swedish study, and just so the audience are aware, we tend to like Scandinavian studies. They tend to have the best data sets because people there have very little freedom. They keep tabs on all the citizens. They do annual consensus forms. They've got data on every person, which obviously is terrible for freedom, but it is excellent for data collection. So this is why people tend to like Scandinavian and Swedish studies over, our 25 sample size university studies in America and Canada and so on. So yeah, Brandstrom and Pachenkas 2019. Best study ever seen on gender transitioning medically. And this is both a combination of hormones, this is a combination of sex reassignment surgery. It's just the idea of trying to transition physically through medical process
What did the
to
study
the other
find?
sex. The study found that there was the same suicide rate, same anxiety rate, and same hospitalization rate with one of the biggest sample sizes we have ever done,
Could you
2,600
send me
transgender
that
people
study just
with
because I'm
a
curious?
control group.
How many
Yeah,
trans people?
absolutely.
How many trans people? 28?
2,600.
Oh, wow, 2,600. Shit. Okay. Yeah, if
Yeah,
you could
it's a
send that in to me,
phenomenal,
I'd be great.
phenomenal sample size. Yeah.
So, I mean, you have a study that says, like, there might be negligible differences, and there are other studies that says it really, helps. So again, if this
Well,
is kind of
the
a if
best
this is a reversible
when the data improves and shows that it's actually going in the other direction, you got to start asking yourself some questions. When all the poor data that's from biased sources is showing, oh yeah, it's all good, and then we have a better study that comes out and shows actually there's no effect,
Did you
you got
send
to
it to
start
me?
asking some questions. Yeah, let me
Is it
get
the
that.
Sage one?
Just opening it here.
I can also send you this. Speaking of 2,600, wait, is this from Nature?
Okay, just opening.
Let me see.
this.
No, this is a different one. Yeah, I mean, I can give you a cohort here, which is of 2,600 trans individuals also. They're able to draw some pretty significant conclusions about the effects of standard care. Hormone treatment seems to be safe with few side effects. The most common complaints from people are
Oh,
lower.
did you just? Okay, can you send that to me?
Yeah, sure. This one
The
comes
you
from
just got?
Nature.
Yep.
And then can you send me yours?
Yep.
Because I'm curious about it. Let's see. Wait, where's the...
Hey guys, welcome to the Hunter and I reading through studies stream. Welcome.
Welcome to the
Glad to
library
have you
where we
here.
quietly are just
Yeah.
we're just reading along. Hello, hi. Hold on,
Yeah,
wait.
no yelling in the library. Everybody quiet.
Let me just I'm gonna try to like speed read through the abstract here, so if you just give me a second. trying here to like just kind of read this through. I mean, it looks like what this one study may have found is that there like wasn't that much of a difference. So again, I feel like we could literally make the same argument. What's better? A potential to have a better quality of life, which I would be happy, by the way, to send you this right here. Here's one from
No, the one you just sent me
is from
isn't
Pediatrics.
a study. It's
That's a follow-up, and also
it's an
yours, by the way,
article with a
says
bunch
right
of
here that
YouTube
this was
videos.
the study used neither a prospective cohort design nor a randomized control trial design. The conclusion that the longitudinal association between gender-affirming surgery and lower use of mental health treatment lends support to the decision to provide gender-affirming surgeries to transgender individuals who seek them is too strong. Finally, although the percentage of individuals...
No, Hunter, you're wrong. The original didn't, but the correction did.
So
there was a correction to this article or to this study, which came out and said, actually, we made a mistake. There is absolutely no difference. Gender-affirming surgery has no impact.
Okay, so I mean,
this is the question: is when the best study says it has no impact, why would we put kids on? Why would we start people in transition processes that cost tons of money? That in some cases, people have died from gender transition surgery. People have literally gotten necrosis from it, and I know these are different things, hormones and gender-affirming surgery, but even with hormones, like you said, there's risk to every medicine. There's risk to anything you can take, whether it be IQ points, lowered bone density, cognitive issues like Lupron is shown in adults. Why would we give people a medicine that the only data we have is either good data saying it has no impact or bad data saying it has very low impact?
Because this
like,
one data point you brought me said there was like not really much of a difference.
There's no objective gains.
That's not true. There are countless other studies, including one I just sent you from Pediatrics, official journal of the American Academy of Pediatrics, that found a pretty strong association between access to pubertal suppression and suicidality. There's a significant inverse association between treatment with pubertal suppression during adolescence and lifetime suicidal ideation among transgender adults who ever wanted this treatment. These results align with past literature suggesting that pubertal suppression for transgender adolescents who want this treatment is associated with favorable mental health outcomes. So here's my real problem here, Lauren, is that there's a massive body of evidence on this subject. You can find some studies here and there that might say that didn't really make that much of a change. But again, you have to look at the overall positives and the overall benefits, right? And it seems that the positives here are a lower chance of suicide and furthermore, a practical effect here of just pausing.
Wait. No. Because right now what you're showing is there's a massive body of really terribly done evidence that doesn't really show anything.
I sent you a meta-analysis. I sent you a systematic review, and that was only a couple of them. I can send you more. I didn't think that we were going to be going back and forth doing like the debate, bro, picking apart.
Well, that's because I'm not just going to believe everything you tell me about a study, because unfortunately I was just in a debate with Xander Hall where he debunked a study I told him, and it was the entirely wrong study, because it seems like a lot of guys
I'm familiar with what study
documents.
That was. I'm familiar with...
A lot of people just use documents and haven't actually read the studies. They don't know what the actual data analysis was.
The study that you sent Xander Hall, the Swedish study, like, you didn't read that study either. I know you didn't, because the study didn't prove what you thought it proved. Sometimes people don't read studies. Sometimes it gets silly. Whatever. The main issue,
just believing random people.
The main issue that I have here.
No, the main issue. We're not all reading the studies.
The main issue that I have here is that there is enough evidence to suggest that puberty blockers are largely safe and lower the chance of suicide. Later on down the line. Hold on. And furthermore, hold on. Wait.
Provided me is terrible evidence. And the best evidence that we have discussed, Brandstrom and Pachenkis, said there was no effect. So this study right now, the one you just sent me, don't pivot from this, because you just threw the study at me and you're not letting me ask questions about it, which is not fair.
Okay, go ahead, ask questions.
Pubertal suppression for transgender youth and risk of suicide ideation. What was the sample size in this study? Like, these are important things. What was the sample size?
Of them, 2.5% received pubertal suppression. Variables. Let's see. Using a cross-sectional survey of 20. Holy shit! Am I reading that number correctly? 20,619 transgender adults, aged 18 to 36-year-old. Okay, yeah. I mean, when it comes to 20,000.
You're telling me they used a sample size of 20,000?
When it comes to social sciences, you have to work with what you have. What you're doing is really just trying to poke holes here. And my problem is that you say that you care about transgender people, and I genuinely do believe that, but it kind of comes across as a virtue signal when you say you care about trans people, but then you're against the treatment for trans people. And then you're desperately like trying to like grab these like one-off studies that kind of might suggest that like there's not actually that much of improvement or whatever to try and argue against this. It seems like you have an underlying agenda a little bit.
Hunter, just because you have a lot of bad studies with bad data doesn't make anything you say true.
Not
and
all of them are bad studies. When it comes to social...
No, they are. The one you just brought up was an online survey. And
when it comes to social... Hold on. When it comes to social sciences, you have to work with what you have here.
Of course.
So yes, of course, the way you're going to determine if their health is better is by a survey. A sample size of 20,000.
Okay, listen, Hunter, you're poisoning the well here by saying I'm just virtue signaling when I ask really genuine questions about the fact that these studies don't seem to prove anything based on the researchers' analysis of them as well. Most of the studies you've sent me, the researchers have said themselves it's very low quality data.
Because we have to work with what we have.
Rarely skews right. And actually, you know what, Hunter, this is something I really agree with you on. I think there is a severe problem with the research around transgender issues and gender dysphoric issues. And most researchers agree with this. There are a lot of people out here, like I was just reading a Mike article about doctors treating trans youth that are grappling with uncertainty and lack of training. They don't know when they should prescribe something or not prescribe something.
Sure. This is sort of a subset of the underlying issue though here, right? Like the problem that I have really is that people are suffering right now. People are dealing with gender dysphoria right now, and so are kids. And your solution seems to be very sort of like, kind of like blasé, sort of like, well, let's just wait till sometime data comes along that might suggest, like, we have studies, we have data. The FDA has approved puberty blockers for cis kids since the 80s. This seems to be working based on the huge study I just gave you with over 20,000.
The FDA approved Vioxx, which killed 60,000 people.
So
and this is why when people say, oh, the social sciences have bad data, I guess that's okay. No, it's not okay. And here's the biggest issue.
It's not okay, and it's not just bad data.
With the Vioxx case, there was a whistleblower. There was a doctor who tried to talk about this. He kept trying to tell people, there are serious issues with this. We need to talk about this. And he kept getting covered up and muffled by the FDA and other organizations. And I think one of the big issues we have with gathering data on how to help transgender people best and what the best approaches are is people are not allowed to do research with the openness they would like to.
This is a level of conspiracism I'm not planning on. No, this is a level of conspiracism.
What do you mean a level of conspiracism?
You're saying that now the reason that the data tends to side with my position is because there's some kind of this LGBT conspiracy that they're not allowed to share studies.
When did I say that, Hunter?
That's what you were just getting at. One of the most common studies cited by conservatives, including you in the Xanderhall debate, was the Swedish study. People are not being shushed or like hushed. I mean, you just sent me this massive study that you claimed proved your point. Like, who's being silenced for coming out with data that contradicts the trans ideology or whatever?
Hunter, it is a fact that 1 in 4 social psychologists will reject someone that they think has socially conservative views from getting a grant application. It is a fact that 1 in 3 hiring divisions will reject people they think might have conservative views in life from going into social sciences divisions. We know this. There is very good data on discrimination against people with more conservative politics, which do tend to be politics that question affirmation surgery, that question hormone blockers. Why would anyone in their right mind trying to forward their academic career do studies or come out with data that suggests that the popular narrative around transgenderism might not be the right approach?
Yeah, see, this is what I mean, the popular narrative or whatever. Like, what do you mean when you say the narrative? What does that mean?
What do I mean when I say
What's
the narrative?
What's the transgender narrative?
as you have said, the FDA have approved hormone blockers. This is becoming it's a very sad thing. It's unfortunate that we are having this issue politicized right now. And I think it's horrible when it's politicized from either side. I don't want the sciences or medicine politicized, whether it be from a right-wing conservative Christian view or from a progressive view, but we do have politicized medicine right now. Take, for example, when I changed my gender in Ontario. When I went into the doctor's office and said, I am a man, the doctor told me, well, I guess I can't deny your lived experience, because she wasn't about to sit there and argue with me about it. There was absolutely no medicine
I'm
involved.
not really
there
too.
was no actual science
I know.
involved in that.
I remember the video. I remember
ridiculous.
that. It was. I remember that.
ridiculous.
I remember that little stunt. I do remember it. But I think that that's kind of, overall getting off subject here.
No,
I think
it's
that
not.
if we're
It's
talking,
very on subject.
we're not really talking about like this transgender narrative here. What you've basically told me is that because sometimes people with conservative views have a harder time, like, I don't know, getting grants or whatever, that means that these studies are all biased in favor of trans people. I mean, excuse me, but like this is obviously getting into levels of conspiracism.
It's not a conspiracy. There are people that have been fired from Dr. McAreth, fired from the NHS, Lisa Littman, who got in trouble with her university. I admit her study wasn't very good, but that wasn't why she got in trouble. She got in trouble for being against the popular narrative. You can't say
sure,
it's conspiracy
I think that we
this
could
is happening. You can't say it's conspiracy that would you agree at least
I would
that
be willing to have
there is discrimination against conservatives in academia.
I would definitely be willing to
say
say I will definitely agree with you in that data should not be politicized. If we want more people who have conservative beliefs that want to do some data on this, fine, let it happen. That's you know what? I'll go ahead and concede that for sure. Yeah, of course, I don't want data collection to be politicized. But right now, the data that we have available makes it pretty clear what the best route for people
Hunter,
with gender dysphoria is.
It does not make it very clear. It's all very poor research with a mixed match of results, some of which saying, the best of which saying...
You're saying it's the best of which only because it's the study that proves your point. Second of all, the multiple different studies I've sent you, some might have not had the most ideal sample size or whatever. That's not an argument. The body of research, the peer-reviewed research, the meta-analyses... all point to the same conclusion, and somehow, hold on, if I could just finish here, and somehow, Lauren, you're telling me that you know more than all of these medical professionals.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying we don't know much. The studies are all bad, and therefore we shouldn't make guinea pigs out of children when all we have is poor research.
This is what I mean. Is like how are we making guinea pigs out of children? Was the FDA making guinea pigs out of children when they were giving them puberty blockers back in the 80s for precocious puberty?
Perhaps. It seems like there needs to be a lot of research in there because it's a 7-point IQ gap is huge. But seriously, even then, I would say abundance of caution. I'm not the one that's trying to radically change medicine here. I'm not the one that's trying to radically change. And here's the thing too, if there were better research, if there were better data saying absolutely this is what is helping people 100%, we know, we probably would not be having this debate right now. But there isn't, Hunter.
But those are impossible standards that you're setting. There's never going to be any study that says anything is 100, nothing is ever going to be 100%.
No, I'm not asking, Hunter, I'm not asking for 100%. I'm asking for data that isn't sample sizes of 20 people from internet surveys. I'm asking for data that isn't self-described by the researchers as extremely low quality. And
I provided you the one with the 20,000 transgender people, but
it does not have 20,000 transgender people, Hunter. It had 89. Like, I don't
using a cross-sectional survey of 20. Wait, am I hold on. I'm talking about this pediatrics official journal, the American Academy of Pediatrics. Am I looking at the wrong thing, or are we talking about something different?
Okay,
I think we might be talking about something different.
No, I'm 99% sure that did not have a sample size of 20,000.
You know what? If it doesn't, I mean, it's using a cross-sectional survey of 20.
Which all this tells me is you do not know the research.
Well, hold on. Lauren, I'm not a sociologist.
Yeah, so the study had 89 people who actually went through puberty suppression.
I'm not a sociologist.
20,000 who did the survey online, 89 of which had actually even gone through puberty suppression.
Where are you seeing this?
So what a sample size. What a sample size.
I mean, you provided one study that was like some one-off study compared to the, again, body of research. Also, I'm not really sure. Hold on. I'm not even sure if you're looking at the same article that I'm looking at here. Second of all, I mean, this just seems really convenient for you to kind of write off the data, write off the facts that kind of are inconvenient for your beliefs. For what though? Like, I don't understand how you can rectify, I guess, saying that you care about transgender people, but then like opposing what seems to work. You can complain about the sample sizes or all you want. I've already explained the complications there when it comes to social sciences. At the best thing you could provide me was a study that said like the difference was like negligible. Okay, so what's the bit, like, possibly having a better quality of life,
Hunter,
not
you
committing
haven't
suicide.
even read the study you just cited. You thought 20,000 transgender people were in it. You just admitted you're not a sociologist, so why are you
Are
defending the
you?
data?
Are you?
No, I'm not.
So
I'm
then
the one
what
that's
does
saying
that
these
have to,
seem
that
like
has
a
no relevance
whole
here.
heck of a lot of bad studies that you haven't read and I haven't read fully.
Lauren, we've both been sent. Hold on, we've
I
both.
care
Come on,
about
this
this
is
for the
this is.
same
You
reason
know
I
that this
care
is
about
uncharitable. You're
anorexic
being
people,
Hold on, if I could just
who
finish
and
really
I
quickly
don't
here.
support
You're
cutting
being
their
uncharitable. We
stomachs
were
down
both
because
sent.
they believe that.
We've both been sending studies back and forth. Okay. Second of all, I know because I watched the Xander Hall debate when you have cited studies before that you yourself haven't read either. Let's
Right,
not
and
get
that was
so
dumb of me, clearly.
Let's not
That
get
was
super.
really dumb of me.
And it was also kind of a bad article, but that is also aside the point. So I mean, it like. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to, I guess, rectify this. Your general conclusion then is that people should just stop having gender dysphoria. I'm not sure how that would be.
That's not my conclusion. Just because I oppose a bad solution with bad research doesn't mean I have all the solutions. And this is once again why I think we need more research into the subject. This is why I think we need to allow for more freedom of discussion around this subject. There are academics that are even left wing that are saying, oh my goodness, we are terrified to talk about this issue honestly because we don't know if we're going to get fired. We don't know if we're going to be
This just sounds like
canceled
a
by
really
campuses.
convenient excuse for why there's not more data that supports the anti-transgender narrative.
Would you not agree? No. If it ends up being good, like, I hope you understand, when I went into researching this stuff, I was entirely open, and this is what I tried to do with debates. I sat here and I was like, okay, I have to be willing to accept that maybe Hunter is right. Maybe these therapies and treatments are absolutely the best option for children. Let's look at the research. Oh my goodness, this is the worst research I've ever seen in my life. And I don't get how you can sit here and acknowledge that what I did in the Xander Hall debate, bringing up a study I had not read, did not know the details of, was stupid. And you've spent this whole debate doing the exact same thing.
No,
if you can
this
recognize
because
that, why are you speaking with such certainty
because
on this issue?
Because it's not just, first of all, because it's not just one study. There are multiple different studies. And I'm going to keep on saying it. You can complain about the sample size all you want. You've provided me one study that showed like maybe there's not as much positive outcomes after all, which again doesn't even necessarily mean that like puberty blockers ultimately aren't the better move if people, because there's also been studies that have shown the complete opposite, right? So I don't really think that you can just complain about the sample size. It sounds to me like you're kind of trying to have your cake and eat it too. You're able to get up here and talk about how tragic it is for trans people and how sad you are that they're struggling, but then you're also able to argue against what seems to be the treatment right now. I agree. I would like for there to be better data. I would like for there to be better, more in-depth studies. But you know what? Not less than ideal data proving one thing versus nothing is better still. And again, puberty blockers have been studied for years. So
no, it's not. It's not better. And the Brandstrom and Pachenka study is not one-off study. There are a ton of studies on this that you haven't read, and it's literally the only study with a large national representative sample size and a proper control group. So why would we not go off of that study instead of a bunch of small, poorly done studies? And it's also not just sample sizes that I'm complaining about. It's the sampling method. It's the statistical bias. There are a heap of issues with the studies you have presented. Also, this is the thing. My general conclusion, I'm not saying don't help people with gender dysphoria. I'm not saying don't give them therapy, don't try to work things out, and when they're an adult they can make decisions that they like. I'm not saying that. I am saying that as long as we have really poor data on something, and the best data we have says it has no difference, no effect, and the thing may stop kids from desisting, which is the absolute most beneficial option for them to not have to deal with gender dysphoria at all, actually everything weighs on the side of it being more beneficial to not give children hormone treatment.
That's
Because
incorrect because we can
it's
literally.
either no effect at all, or it stops them from desisting because they don't go through puberty. So everything leans on the side of being beneficial to not giving kids hormone blockers. And this doesn't mean I don't think adults should be able to do what they want. They should, but the data you're showing me, the only good
But puberty
data
blockers are
is
for
the one
kids,
saying
right?
there's no effect.
But puberty blockers are going to obviously be for kids, right? So like
Yes.
obviously puberty blockers are going to be like when you say you're fine with people doing it when they're an adult. I mean, the problem is if you are gender dysphoric and you go through the wrong puberty, that one raises your chance of committing suicide later on in life. And it also is a practical thing. It makes it harder to pursue further transition. The puberty blocker
Well,
seems like a pretty simple, middle of the ground approach. Let kids figure it out. You talk about like regretting it or desisting or whatever. That's as a result, obviously, of letting themselves have time to kind of think this through. That's what puberty blockers are
no,
for.
desisting isn't regretting it and detransitioning. Detransitioning and desisting are two different things.
I recognize that,
It's not
but puberty
regret,
blockers
it's
could,
realizing, oh, I'm not actually transgender at all.
yeah, which is exactly. Thank you. I'm glad you said that. That is exactly the point of puberty blockers. The actual point is so that kids can go on it who have gender dysphoria, and they are given time to decide. Maybe it will desist. If it does, great. That is ideal. Let's take them off the puberty blockers. Then they can go through regular puberty and continue living their regular ass life. Or we have people who have gender dysphoria, and the better studies have shown that the majority of them do go on to pursue
Hunter,
treatment.
you keep ignoring this point. No, the majority do not go on. 88%
No,
of
that's
young
using
boys
referrals, and
desist.
we already went over that.
And if puberty, what's wrong with referrals? That's what every single study uses.
Because
you're
if
gonna
you
defend
actually
all of your
control for
studies
when
as
the
being
children
fine,
have gender dysphoria, the majority of them go on to transition.
if you are blocking the thing that allows children to make the decision on whether they are transgender or not, you actually aren't allowing them to go on and grow up and make the decision. If puberty is the deciding factor for most children
It's
on
not
whether
puberty.
they are
It's
trans
having
or
that.
not,
No, it's having that window of
no,
time.
it
It's
is
not
puberty.
specifically puberty. And if it
It is
were,
specifically puberty.
no,
This
then
has
why
been
are
studied. I'll
kids
send
able to
you
go
the
through
study.
puberty blockers and give it time? That's the point of going on puberty blockers, is to give it
Well,
time to decide if they are gender dysphoric or not.
Okay, what is all right? Do you have any source showing that it is not puberty that is the main deciding point for kids when they decide they want to desist? Any source? Because I have sources showing it is puberty. I don't know where you're getting this idea that it's not puberty.
Okay, I mean,
I
it's
really need to
probably
understand
a mix of, sure, fine. You know what? It probably is a mix of puberty and other factors as well.
Wait. Okay, where is it a mix? I only have studies showing that it is puberty.
So
that
you're
is the
saying
main
if they
point.
don't go through puberty, then they will continue to be transgender?
Okay, let me read you this study.
Okay.
Adolescents with persisting gender dysphoria, persisters, and those in whom the gender dysphoria remitted, desisters, indicated they considered the period between 10 and 13, i.e., puberty, to be the most crucial point. They reported that this is the period they became increasingly aware of the persistence or desistence of their childhood gender dysphoria. So this is actually the deciding point for whether someone is transgender as well. And you are taking away that deciding point from people
No,
by
that's
giving them a hormone therapy that only has bad data supporting it, and the only good data shows it has no positive effect.
I would have to say that if you're really going to take that approach, I mean, like, I don't think that you can look at this here and then pick apart little data points that you're not too comfortable with, little like methodology things that you're not too happy with, and then try to.
These aren't little things, Hunter. These are not little things at all. 88% of young boys desisting, and the main point of children
Do you feel like we're
deciding
starting
whether
to
they're
go in a
going
little bit of
desist or
circles
not
here?
being puberty is not a small. Well, to accuse it of being a small thing is just ridiculous. You're
Because
forcing people to have gender dysphoria for longer.
No,
that
we're
could
not
potentially
forcing people to have
disappear.
gender dysphoria at all. People, at the point of going on puberty blockers is to give them time to decide if it's going to desist or if they are going to pursue treatment. Now, during that time, during 10, 11, or 12, 13, yes, it can become more clear but that is whether they're on puberty blockers or not. Again, I'm going to keep on saying this because it's the medical consensus. The point of puberty blockers is to pause puberty, to give the child time to figure it out. If they desist, then they can go off the puberty blockers. Your assertion that if they go on puberty blockers, it's going to cause them to continue being trans is false. It's not true. And the entire
I didn't say
the entire purpose of the medication is to put a pause there.
They're going to continue having dysphoria and not make a decision on whether to desist or not. And desistance is the most effective treatment we have for dysphoria right now.
But we can't force people to desist.
That is an awesome solution.
Hold on, listen. I would agree.
No,
of course, if people aren't transgender, if people are choose not whatever desistance, whatever, you can't make people desist. We have to work within what we're able to do, which is alleviating gender incongruence and gender dysphoria.
No, but if that alleviation causes the majority of people to continue to suffer, to continue to have dysphoria, and to desist later or not desist at all because they never went through puberty, that is a horrible solution, Hunter.
All right. Well, basically what I've learned from this conversation is the data doesn't have methodology that you like, so you can pretty much ignore it. You talk about caring a lot about trans people, but then you kind of seem to be against what the medical consensus seems to suggest is the treatment.
It's not the medical consensus.
Do you have any closing thoughts here?
Yeah, if methodology doesn't matter, I can go and ask my Twitter followers if they think trans people will be cured if we just killed them. And if they all say yes, then that's a study and you can't argue with it. Methodology matters.
I did not say hold on, I did not say methodology doesn't matter at all. I never once said that. I said that when it comes to social sciences, there are complications there, and many countless different studies, some being meta-analyses, some being long-term systematic reviews, some being cohorts and whatever, all finding this treatment to be effective for trans people right now seems to be the answer. But I appreciate you coming on here, Lauren. Really good.
Can I make one last statement?
Sure, yeah. If you want to go ahead and close off, I'm not going to respond to anything here, though.
Okay, that's fine. I did enjoy talking to you. I enjoyed going through this stuff. I still have a lot of questions. I think that this is a highly complex disorder that requires a lot more data on it. I hope that people are able to research it more. Having a disorder doesn't make you worth less at all. It just means you're struggling with something, and we as a society need to accept that and work through it. And, I think that if most children are desisting, that is clearly the more positive route to lean to, rather than experimental hormone therapy, which has poor data behind it. So I'm going to lean towards, just being a bit careful, having a bit, not going towards radical solutions with poor data, and encouraging desisting, which seems to be the best solution we have at the moment. And until it is fully known, post-puberty or adulthood, I always want to lean towards the most positive outcomes for people, and that is not struggling with transgenderism and body dysmorphia in the first place. All
right. Thank you, Lauren. Appreciate you coming on here. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks for having me, Hunter. Bye-bye. Cheers. Bye.
All right. Good conversation. We got some donos here. Wow, we got a lot here. The Pretty Danny, thank you for the $5. Appreciate the donation. Black Dynamite, thanks for the 2. Lauren, please educate this man, please, for the love of God. Black Dynamite, thank you for the 2. Oh, let's go, Lauren. Oh shit, we got a hater on here. Hell yeah. Please keep on donating. Sucky Suck for $5. Thanks for the $2. The discussion is getting spicy. Thanks, Heinrich, for the $5. Hey, Hunter, this, in my opinion, your best debate yet. Just the right amount of aggression without being rude. Keep it up. Take my money. Appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, like I said, I wasn't going in there with a hostile intent. I really wanted to just have a conversation and talk and see where it goes. Black Dynamite, thank you for the $5. She's demolishing him, yo. Hey, can you please keep on donating? Tell me how much you hate me. Sucky Suck, thanks for the $5. Hunter is the ropes, not gonna lie. Don't know what that means, but okay. Black Dynamite, thanks for the 2. When did she say that? TF. Okay, thanks for the hate comments. Please keep donating. Tessa, thanks for the 5. Black Dynamite, you again. Let's go, Lauren. Keep it coming, bruh. Tessa, thanks for the 3. Sucky for $5. Thanks for the 2. Lauren is wifey material, yo. Ethan E, thank you for the $8.99. The Netherlands uses samples of all trans people in the entire country, claiming bad samples doesn't work anymore. All right, thank you. Black Dynamite thanks for the 2. BTFO Hunter. Oh, nice. Hey, keep donating. Keep donating. Tell me how much you hate me. The Rickiest thanks for the 2. Hunter Centipede. Lauren Rick Hunter. Black Dynamite, you again. Wow, thanks for the 2. Hunter's being hunted. Get it. The Real 199. She only has problems, no solutions. Ethan E, thank you for the 3. Even anti-trans Dr. Zucker gives hormones at 13. Black Dynamite thanks for the 2. Good debate from both. I sub 2. I love them both. Oh, so maybe Black Dynamite wasn't too much of a fucking hater then, huh? I guess chat box can come back up here now. Hunter, you lost. Hunter won. Hunter won. Hunter definitely won. Every time Hunter told him that the referral study was turbo, she would deflect it. Lauren won. Lauren won. I see like the same people repeatedly saying that Lauren won. Yeah, you know, listen, people are always going to accuse, since I was the one that ended the conversation, people are going to accuse me of rage quitting. It doesn't matter what you do, okay? You have to recognize the conversation was going in circles. Hunter lost, Hunter won, Hunter lost. Lauren won, Hunter won, Lauren won. Hunter won for sure. It was a tie. Lauren won. Hunter Avalon is bad at debating. Hunter the winner. Hunter lost. John Wick, I've seen you now 5 times saying that Lauren won. I got it. I think I know your position here, okay? 99% of Twitch chat seems to think Hunter won. Wow, I came into this debate really late. Hunter, you're my friggin' hero. Hunter lost. There's literally no evidence you could give that she would accept. Roz, thanks for the 5. Hunter, you owned her. Next time, ask what she would do if stranded on an island. What? Okay. There's literally